This one's working. Well, I have one on. You notice, Elise? I'm talking very loudly. Who's reserved next to my brother that didn't show up? It's a huge crowd on a rainy night in Nashville. Carmen Ann is here. How you doing? I love you more, baby. Thank you for coming. You know where I was? I was at the cinema. Yes, I was at the cinema with Miss Ashley Judd. Yeah, she got hungry and went to dinner. I couldn't lure her over here. I tried. It's good to see you. Well, I'm here to talk about all the stars in the heavens, but also other things. Do I know you? I do. Oh my God, it's Tom Macon from Room 100. Come up here. Give me a big squeeze. This is oh my God, my classmates. It makes me cry.
Don't cry.
You know who showed up, Tom? You know who showed up? Do you remember? Just turn around and show everybody. See, I only show people that look fairly young. Like if people don't look good, I just don't even acknowledge them. It's gotten to that point. How you doing?
Good.
What, now, who's down here with you?
Katie.
Oh, Katie, come here. Give me a hug. See how it's like old home week. See, and I'm gonna just make you come up on stage and do this. Okay, so here's what happened. Okay, so you know Ricky, have you seen the movie?
Not yet. Hey, look.
This is the closest it
This
is
is
to
closest.
home.
We drove 200 miles almost to get here.
Okay, so 200 miles. So how long you staying?
30 minutes.
Okay, now go sit down. I love you.
I love you too.
So good to see you.
I'm happy to see you.
I know you are, honey. Oh, I love him so much. Anyway, so just to tell you are you taping this? I have to be careful now. See, now I'm like on lockdown, but don't worry, I won't be. Am I supposed to sit here? Like, what's the rules? Elise, this is like too elaborate. You know, I like things simple, like give me a podium, that's it. Anyway, I'll be moving around. Anyhow, so we went to Big Stone Gap. I'll just give you the upshot of all this. And we go there, and there was a boy named Robert Carroll. Do you remember Robert Carroll? You'll remember him if you ever saw him, you'd know him. Anyway, so he comes to the parade in Big Stone Gap, and he has a big box with him. This could only happen in Big Stone Gap, probably happen in Nashville too. And he shows up with this big box for me. And I said, Robert, he said, I didn't think you'd remember me. I said, who could forget you? Thank you. And he said, I have this box for you. And I said, Robert, how convenient. We're at the parade for the movie. And I'm supposed to be, see, what they just basically did was give me all the jobs. Because it was like the I Love Lucy show when that same guy, you know, when they stopped at the hotel in the middle of the night and the guy was like, he was the bellman, he was he was everything. Well, they would say to me, okay, now you're going to go be with the lady at the parade. You're going to tell him who's in the floats. Because nobody wrote anything down. It was small town life. So Robert Carroll came and had the box and he said, so I said, okay, Robert, and he said, I didn't have your address, so I just thought I'd bring it to the parade. So it was a box of flameless candles. Great, I love flameless candles. I appreciated the gift, but this is what he said to me. He said, in the box are flameless candles. The parade's going on, and we're on TV. We're on the local WCYB affiliate, NBC affiliate. So Robert, I gotta tell him what the floats are. He said, but first I have to tell you what, he said, your mother gets the red flameless. You get the beige flameless. Give your mother the tall pillar. I mean, he was taking 2 hours to tell me about these candles, which I was very grateful. Anyway, so I'm going over here because you're giving me the stink eye like I shouldn't sit over there. Anyway, so it was like our whole class came. And it was the most beautiful, wasn't it, Michael? It was fantastic, make you cry. And, just happy, beautiful, lovely memories of home. Nobody dusted here in Nashville. That's okay, Elise. But all this... Sorry, Tom, drove 200 miles for no dusting. It's okay, Elise. It's fine, really. Don't move the podium. Okay, but we don't dust it. It's fine, Elise. Very fancy here at the public library. All right, so last time I was here, what was I here for, Elise? All Stars in the Heavens? No. Shoemaker's Wife. See, you're the one who's drunk. Okay, anyway, we were teasing each other in the hallway because I ran into a wall back there and I said, I'm really not drunk to her. I'm not, but I just ran into the wall because we were laughing. Anyway, the last time I was here was for the Shoemaker's Wife, and that was a very meaningful personal story. And so this one, I had this story to tell because I'm obsessed with old movies. And I should begin by saying I'm dying for you to read this book because it is very personal, because I have a deep family connection in this story. Now, when I was a little kid, growing up in Big Stone Gap, we go visit our grandmother in Rosetta, Pennsylvania in the summertime. And we didn't know it, but we were a free workforce for my grandmother. At the time, we didn't know that. We thought we were visiting family and that this was our vacation. But in fact, what is it? Oh, I see you're, this is good. I'm glad you're doing this. Do you see I just caught on? I'm so slow, and I just saw Sue Burton, who's the first face I saw when I moved to Big Stone Gap, and she still looks the same, second grade, okay? That's all I'm saying. Okay, so did you see Tom Macon down here? I know, so nice. Anyway, so you see my brother Michael over here, Sue? Okay, Jennifer, did you see him? Did you see Tom Macon? Okay, good. So anyway, so I'm sure there's others here. They'll come forward as my eyes clear from the glaucoma. Anyway, in the dust that Elise left for me. Anyway, from the filth here at the library. I'm kidding, Tom. Just kidding. It's a little humor, okay? A little humor. I love Nashville. Okay, so we'd go up there in the summer, and we had this little pint-sized great Aunt Mary. She was born in 1905. And so my grandmother, for like a break from her chores, which were things like, Adriana, I want you to go down there in the field, pick the poison. Poison ivy, pick it, pull it. Pick the poison. I'm not kidding. Pick the poison. Then she'd say, take that push mower and go do that. That hill was raked like 360. You have to push that push mower. I'm lucky I have legs. The legs didn't just get mowed off, And then she turned to my boy cousin and say, could I get you something cool and refreshing to drink? She never made the boys do anything. It's always the girls doing these just death-defying feats. Anyway, so then on Saturdays, if she had something to do, like get her hair done or something, she'd drop us off at Great Aunt Mary's, and then Great Aunt Mary would have, at least it was like a little bit veiled, her chores. We would roll pasta. Now, when you're 10 years old, you don't have arthritis yet, but they're going to try to implant it in there so that when you get to be 40, 50, you're going to get it because you roll cavatelli, but we called it chickadades. Remember this, Michael? 2-finger process. She'd rolled the dough out, and you'd go like this for hours. And I learned to have such a hatred of people eating this chickadades because I'd just watch them eat it like this, and I'd go, no, because it was just hours of this, hours of rolling this pasta dough. Anyway, at the end, she would, Aunt Mary would go, okay, so now we're going to relax. This is after about 6 hours of doing this. Till you thought you were going to have to be committed. This. Hours of this. Till it was like mountains of it. She said, we're going to go upstairs. And then we go upstairs. And all Italians in the freezer, there would never be any ice in the freezer or boxes of anything. It would be trays, wax paper with cookies. Cookies. Are you Italian? No. Okay. But just trays and trays of cookies. And the thing about cookies that you need to know is they don't really freeze. They just cool in there because they're made of lard and butter. They're just cooling. And she would make like little wedding cookies that had icing on them and coconut and stuff. And what you didn't want to get were those fig bars. Nobody wanted the fig bars. But as you grew up, you realized those fig bars had a purpose. You ate those last. They chased everything out. You did all the other lard cookies, and then you had the fig bar at the end, you see. It's a little cleanser there, okay? Nobody liked them. We didn't know the purpose, so they would have them at the end. So anyway, she put some cookies out, and then she'd pour you some juice. Italians don't have juice like regular people. Am I right, Carmen? It's a thick, I don't know what fruits are used, but it is not regular store-bought juice that's colorful in color. It's usually a little bit on the, you poor things, you're Southerners, you're like, where is she going with this? It is a thick kind of pear, apricot, kind of a juicy thing. She gives you very little. You almost need a spoon with this juice. It's so thick. It's icky. Nobody ever goes to any of the great aunt's house and say, get me some of that juice. You're like, please. And of course, I mentioned there's no ice. So you could never cut it with anything. And you never asked, can you put a little something in here to cut this? You just drank it. And you didn't like it, but you wanted the cookies, so you drank the juice, okay? Are you getting the scene here? Okay. Also, it was your treat. And if anybody ever gave you a treat, you took the treat, okay? So we go upstairs and we'd have this juice and this cookie situation. And then Aunt Mary would say, we're going to watch the $1 Million Movie. Now, when she said those words, the room would clear, except for me. Because I loved the $1 Million Movie, the black and white movie. Now, Aunt Mary, because she was born in 1905, this was the 70s, so she had seen the movies the first time they came out in the 30s. And in the 1930s, when you went to the movies, it isn't like now. There wasn't TV, and there wasn't even radio. There was just the movies. So you would work in a factory all day, and then you would go to the movies at night. It was your entertainment. You'd do the dishes, and you'd clean up, and then you'd go to the movies. Now let me tell you about her life. Aunt Mary was a single mother of 2 boys, Iggy and Freddie. She worked in a factory, and she lived in the family homestead all her life in Rosetta, Pennsylvania. I'm the only person known in the family to have ever asked her where her husband was. Ever. I asked her the question, where is Uncle Charlie? And she said these words, he's around. I never ever saw him. I never saw a picture of him. I never saw him drive by in a car. Nobody ever went, ooh, there went Uncle Charlie. Nobody ever said, oh, wait, he's on his way, or he picked the boys up, or anything. He was mysterious. He was a phantom. Nobody knew where he was. But she stayed married to him all her life. Is anybody here Catholic? Okay, 3 people. That's pretty much par for the course in the South. I am Catholic, and so there's 4 of us. Later, we'll meet at my hotel for a little session of something about how there's no Catholics here. I'm actually very proud to be a Catholic because I grew up in Southwest Virginia where it was so uncool, you just sort of went with it. I mean, you can ask Sue Burton, it was the uncoolest thing to be. Even though we had hippie priests and everything, it just really never caught on, did it, Sue? Couldn't get anybody to join. It really couldn't even get anybody to go with us, really, even as a lark. People just, right, Tom? Nobody really wanted anything to do with us, and that was okay. I mean, it was just what it was, but I kind of like it, and I actually kind of love it. It's just, I had no idea they even had big churches or anything till I moved to New York. That's how unsophisticated I was. I thought it was just a dinky church with 12 people. Just our family. I didn't know. Had a lot of people. When you got to New York, there were a lot of churches. And some fancy ones, too. I was shocked. Because if you grew up in Big Stone Gap, we didn't have a fancy church. We had, in fact, it's called Sacred Heart, but they actually, people visited Big Stone Gap, they called it St. Cindy's because it's just made of cinder block. It's called St. Cindy's. So that's what they named it. The people that came to visit. Because we craved a little fancy. We didn't have it. It was just really about praying, which was fine by me. Anyway, Aunt Mary. So Aunt Mary and I, we watched the old movies, and so she taught me about the stars and who her favorites were. And she used the language of the 1930s movies. She'd call a guy a chiseler, or she'd call a woman a dame, or she'd call a certain kind of woman a Jezebel. I love that word. And she just sort of would tell me, you know, the plots of the movies, because when you watched them on the $1 Million Movie, they'd cut scenes out. They'd cut scenes out. Her favorites were fight pictures and Westerns. I kind of didn't really like the Westerns, although I liked Stagecoach. I liked John Ford. I liked Frank Capra. She liked Frank Capra. She thought he was a little saccharine, which is I've been accused of. Fancy that. And I liked him too. He was Italian. I could kind of relate to that. But Aunt Mary liked that kind of a movie. She liked adventure pictures. She liked Clark Gable, and I liked Clark Gable. So when nobody was watching old movies because there was no TCM, I was watching them with Aunt Mary. So when I went to St. Mary's and in Indiana, and by the way, I'm not bragging like Donald Trump that I have such a big education, because I probably wouldn't have gotten into college except for my sister Pia, who is really smart. She's ahead of me, and she went into the nun that lets people into St. Mary's. And I said that my sister Pia sucked up to Sister Francesca Kennedy so much that she left a hickey on the administration door. It's true, because my grades and marks weren't good, and Pia cried and said, "She's really smart, you gotta let her in, sister." And the nun let me in. It's a true story. It's sad, but it's the way it went. I don't like to say it, but I answer a lot of emails with, "If your child has a C average, come sit by me. I will make you feel better about your C average child." Now, suddenly I have a Southern accent. I don't know where it came from. Somewhere between that door and here, I got it back. I don't know where it came from, Sue. It must have it materialized, just in thin air. Okay, so Aunt Mary and these movies and Clark Gable, and I'm at St. Mary's, and I write a poem about Clark Gable. So one day I'm sleeping in my room at St. Mary's, and there's a banging on the door at about 5:30 in the morning. And I'm a theater major, and I do not like to get up early. Banging on the door, and I stumble to the door, and I open the door, and there's a little nun there. Now, I know we've only got 4 Catholics here, but there was a time when nuns wore a thing called a habit. And this one had a paper plate on her head, and a veil, and an outfit, and she was old. She was old, older, twice as old as anybody in this room, including me. Old. She had an envelope. She said, asked me who I was. I told her, because I was scared. I thought, well, it's a nun. If I smell burning rubber, I know I've gone to the other side. That's the sign that you're going to the other side. It's not burnt toast, Carmen Ann. It's burning rubber. Just remember that. You smell that? It's over. Say goodbye. It's over. So she says, I have something for you, and she hands me an envelope. So I open the envelope, and in it's a picture of a little boy in a straw hat, 8 by 10. And I say, Sister, why are you giving me this? And she said, well, read it. And at the bottom, in a woman's handwriting, it said, Dear Sister Agnes Eugenia, that's her name. Look at me, I'm 4 years old. Please pray for me and my pa. John Clark Gable, 1965. Now, I'm in college, it's the 80s. The 80s. The 80s. So I said, Sister, why are you giving me this? And she said, well, I'm old, and I'm giving everything away, And I read this poem you wrote about Clark Gable in the school magazine, and I sent it to Kay Gable, who's Clark Gable's widow. And she couldn't believe anybody so young remembered her husband. And she was very touched by it. I'm giving you this picture, but I want you to promise me you're going to visit her someday. And I said, of course, sister, I will go visit her. Of course, I didn't have any money. I wasn't going to go anywhere. Now I'm suddenly sound like Chris Rock. I didn't have any money. I didn't know where I was going. You could tell I'm on tour, and I'm watching cable. Anyway, and so Kay Gable died in 1983. I never met her. That's the sad part of the story. But you would think that somebody who'd have the courage to ask Aunt Mary, the only person in the family, where's your husband, would have asked this nun, how did you know Mrs. Gable? But I didn't ask her. I just took the picture. And I carried that picture around for all these years. So then I thought, well, I want to write this story. So I started to research Clark Gable, which is how I got to the story, All the Stars in the Heavens. I wanted to find out about the boy in the picture because when Clark Gable died, it said he had one child. One child, this kid. But he didn't. He also had another daughter. This child was born in 1961. Gable had died in 1960. He was 60 years old. Wait now, let me get this, I'm bad with math. He was born in 1901. He was 59 years old when he died. His wife was 44 when she had John Clark Gable, Kay. She had 2 children from a previous marriage. That's right. And his other child was born on November 6, 1935, and her name was Judy Lewis, and she's the daughter of Loretta Young and Clark Gable. So that sent me on a path to find out everything about that girl. Now you say, well, how did you find out about her? Well, Loretta Young died in the year 2000, so the book is bookended with that, and then Judy Lewis had written a book about it, and that book came out in 1992, and I had read it and put it aside because I was interested in The Boy in the Hat. I didn't think too much of it. And then I just continued, and then I actually started to do the research. But I was writing historical fiction, so I didn't really think about that. I just read about everybody, David Niven and Hattie McDaniel and all the people in the different families and Loretta Young, who I didn't have too much of an opinion on, except that I knew that my grandfather was crazy about her. My grandmother kind of couldn't stand her. So that intrigued me. I thought, well, anybody she didn't like, I'm going to try to find out about her, you know. And she had a television show, and here's the thing about her. She was nominated for 2 Oscars. She won 1. She got 3 Emmys. She retired from movies at 38, and she retired from television at 48, and she was offered all these parts, and she only did 1 more movie in the late 80s. But she was a really smart businesswoman, and she invested in real estate in Beverly Hills. Like she was a co-owner of the Beverly Hills Hotel. I mean, she was smart, smart, smart. And her daughter and she, imagine, had a falling out because the daughter wrote that book. But there was one sentence in that book that I just circled over and over again, that the daughter said that the greatest regret that her mother had was that she never married Clark Gable. And I thought, well, that's interesting. All these accomplishments that this woman had, and that was her regret? Because, you know, you get to a point in life and you just look around and, you know, one of the most intriguing things to me is who ends up with who? Do you ever sit on a bench and just watch people go by and you go, why are they together? Sometimes you actually want to just go up to people and go, how did this happen? Do you find it as fascinating as I do? That's why I like making a movie, because then I could put people together I think that look right together. And you could break them up when they don't look right together. You know what I mean? That's why I like the movies. You see, the movies aren't supposed to be, well, now people argue with me about this. They want real-looking people in the movies. Well, I don't. If I want to look at real people, I'll look in the mirror. I want to look at beautiful people when I go to the movies. I want aspirational people when I go to the movies. Don't you? I don't want to go to the movies and be depressed. I want to go to the movies and I want to see people like Rita Hayworth. And I want to see people like Myrna Loy. And I want to see people like Betty Davis. People like people in my movie. Jenna Elfman. And I like to look at Ashley Judd. There's nothing wrong with that. Funny people. People that have talent. Is there anything wrong with that? I don't think so. Why am I getting defensive? Now suddenly I'm Dr. Phil. I'm going through the whole gamut of personalities up here tonight. I'm just wondering who that reserved seat's for. Why is that sign still on that seat? Here comes some folks. How you doing? Look, here's a couple from Comic Con. This is Brandon. And is that your director? How you doing? Come on in. There's a reserved seat down here for you, dear. There's a reserved seat right down here. Come on down. Right here in front. We only got to one, but you know, that's... Come on down.
Thank you, sir.
That's my brother right there.
I've seen this act.
He said he's seen this act before. That's pitiful. It's not my problem. Anyway, back to my Aunt Mary. You know, I'm going to tell you this little story about her. Then I want to take some questions because it's been a little bit free-form tonight. The reason is, frankly, I was freaked out about the dust. Not good. Threw off my whole act tonight. Sent me down some paths I don't normally go. I'm kidding. No, it's been fantastic. All right, so I'm just getting warmed up. Anyway, my Aunt Mary, you know, we never called her a single mother. We just never called her that. She was our great Aunt Mary. We never identified her as a single mother. But then when you looked around the family, we had widows, we had everybody. We had the Uncle Charlies that just disappeared like a vapor. Where'd that man go? You know, there was always stories, you know. And then you had the people married very, very long time, you know. But truthfully in our family, most of the people, you know, the first thing you need to know is that when people die in my family, they never look bad right before they go. So we have no warning. Even in the face of major illness. I'm serious. People just look normal. We get a call. Everybody gathers. They go, well, they look good. It doesn't mean anything. They got about 12 minutes. What are you talking about? People look good. Our dad is a perfect example. He looked like he was taking a nap. I mean, he had not lost any weight, right, Michael? He had a full head of hair. He was evidently very ill. But we just sort of all stood around the bed and went, you know, he looks good. He looked good. And it wasn't just us. Friends would pop into the hospital room and go, he's looking good. I don't think he's going anywhere. And then others would come in and go, no, he's on his way out. We couldn't believe it. 12 minutes. Seriously. So anyway, that's a sidebar. Just thought I'd throw that in. Anyway, Aunt Mary... I am hopping around because I'm going kind of to the other side, then I'm coming back to life. Anyway, Aunt Mary, because her man was missing and my grandmother was a widow, and my grandmother was a young widow. She was 60 when my grandfather died. I always said to her, did you ever date again? Did you ever go out on a date? This is another thing in my family. They never date again. They could be widowed at 32. They don't go out again. They do not. Evidently, one God, one man. This is the philosophy. My grandmother did admit to me, though, once when she was in her Craftmatic bed, and I was sleeping in my grandfather's bed. They had twins like I Love Lucy. And she said to me, she said she did let a man buy her a hot dog in Atlantic City once. That was it, though. It wasn't a date or anything, she let him buy her a hot dog. That was it. about a 75-cent hot dog. But that was just a little conversation and a hot dog, and that was, got back on the bus and went home. That was it. Nothing more than that. She did say this to me, though. She said, when I got married, she said, be nice to your husband, because when you get to be my age, there's no men on the bus to Atlantic City. She said, the men are just, it's over. You know, she said, now there are women, she said, that do go down to Florida. She said, there's 2 men down there. And she said, there's about 5,000 women fighting over the 2 of them. She said, if you're up for that, she said, have at it, but there's no men down there, you know, not enough anyway. Anyhow, so my grandmother would travel with my great Aunt Mary. They'd go on trips. And they went to Hawaii. Has anybody been to Hawaii? Okay, so let me just give, in the 70s, I can give you like, you would go to the pineapple factory. Did you go? Okay. And you went to Diamond Head, right? Okay. And you saw the hula dancers, right? Okay, yeah. And so saw some volcano spitting a little smoke, right? Yeah, uh-huh. And did you see the Don Ho show? No, he was dead, right? Okay. Well, in 1974, the finale of the trip is the Don Ho show. Now, for those of you who don't know who Don Ho is, he had a big hit called Tiny Bubbles. And Don Ho was an attractive Hawaiian. He had long kind of brown hair, and he wore a white suit, kind of a jumpsuit. Everybody wore the Elvis jumpsuits in the 70s, including Don Ho. And at the end of his act, he would, they'd turn on the bubble machine, and there were tables out here. You'd have dinner. And my Aunt Mary was there with my grandmother. And they were all, you know, and he would call the grandmothers to the stage. The room was just filled with bubbles. Now, keep in mind, it was filled with bubbles because Don Ho would never cut the machine off because he was stoned out of his mind. He had a little pot problem and a little drinky, well, my grandmother, my Aunt Mary would call it a sauce problem. Now, you would think we're Italian, so sauce means tomatoes. No, sauce meant alcohol. Had a little bit of a sauce problem with the marijuana. Okay, so he would, but he would sing Tiny Bubbles. So he would call the grandmothers up to the stage, and they would line up over here. Now, my grandmother was always first in line for everything because she was spry and she could move. Now, at this point, she was in, let's see, 74. So she was late 60s at this point. And she said that she and Aunt Mary were at their back table, but they bolted to the front. And my grandmother got on stage first. So he said, call the grandmothers. And so he said, come on up. And my grandmother came on stage first. And what happens is that Don Ho took my grandmother in his arms, he dipped her, and he kissed her. And this is what my grandmother said to me, reliving the moment. She says, hey, he really kissed me. Now, by that, she meant she came out of the clinch. They took a picture. The picture, which I have, is in an orchid. It's like orchid lace, and it's a black and white picture of her. Now, my grandmother said she came out of the clinch and she staggered across the stage. She said she didn't know whether to call the police, scream, go back and hit him because she felt violated, but she didn't know what to do because he had really kissed her. So she said, I just felt along the wall to get back to my table. The picture, my grandmother looks like she's resisting, you know, something during a wartime. It's horrible. It's a terrible, unromantic kiss. Just bad. Almost looks like a dental visit is the best way I can explain this. It's just her trying to resist Don Ho. So she gets back to her table and she's thinking, how can I sue this restaurant and get my money back for my meal? When she realizes, oh no, my sister-in-law Mary is on the loose somewhere in this restaurant. So she looks up and she sees Mary in the clinch. And Mary kind of comes out of it, and Viola's in the back, and she's waving, Mary, come back, because she realizes the same violation has happened to her sister-in-law. But Mary doesn't go back to the table. She goes down along the stage and gets back on line for more. So when Aunt Mary dies, Cousin Iggy sends me the picture in the orchid heart, but it's like the most romantic kiss with Don Ho you've ever seen. It's true. My grandmother and my aunt, really, they saw the world. Well, really, they only saw Honolulu and the Philadelphia Zoo, but they did travel. They both loved the movies, and they both loved the imaginary worlds of the stars, and they thought that Hollywood, it was the greatest landscape of stars. They believed all of it. They thought it was real. My grandmother's wedding gown was Claudette Colbert's, and it happened one night. Seriously, they loved the cars. My grandmother would just love, she'd go to the movies and she'd see a car and then she would dream about that car. And any of the shop girl romances with Joan Crawford, she would think, that's me. And they loved that stuff and they believed all of it. And if they were around now, they would be so disappointed. They wouldn't believe what was going on. This whole Kardashian thing would just, you know, they used to make movies of the great books. Now you got a great book, it takes you forever to get the movie made because they don't know. Somebody will, in Hollywood, they don't even know really who the playwrights are now, where they used to know who the writers were. It's just a different world. You know, I'm saying this in a library, but it's all changed. And so you wonder, well, where's it all kind of going? Except we're here, so maybe there's hope. There must be. And we have a director here, so there must be hope. And a young actor, so that's good. The artists always pull it together and figure it out somehow. I'm sure that if my grandmother were around, she'd say, well, something good will come of it. Something must come of it. I mean, they had their stories, now we have ours. What are they? You know, we have to figure it out. And you know, the other great thing is that film and books and art and music, think about it, more accessible than they've ever been. And you have more ways of finding these things. Remember when you only had certain outlets to get your art? There used to be 3 television networks. When you went to the movies, you only had so many choices. Now you have a lot more choices. And in terms of books, remember when you went to the bookstore, there were only a few shelves. Now there's a lot more. Now it's harder for the artist to be heard and seen, but they figure it out. We find a way. We try to get to you. We try to show up at libraries and talk to you. Say, oh, can you read this book? So when I went to write this book, I was like, well, what am I trying to say with this book? With her. There was a lot of things that came up with Loretta Young that I thought was really fascinating. First of all, I really liked her. And I didn't know that I would. And you might say, well, why wouldn't you like her? Well, she's not kind of my type. For example, she had a swear jar on her set. And that seemed to me to be a little precious. So like if anybody on the crew swore, if I had to put a quarter in a jar every time I swore on my set, I'd be penniless. I swore all the time. That's terrible, I know. I don't like to admit it. But you know, you get a little frustrated, so you curse a little. Well, Loretta wouldn't have it, because the men, you know, if they dropped something, they'd say, damn, and she'd say, Ronald, put 25 cents in the swear jar, and all that money would go to a halfway house or one of her charities. And she raised a lot of money for charity. Well, on the Loretta Young show once, she had a special guest star, Ethel Merman came from New York. And Ethel Merman, I know you're going to love this story, And Ethel Merman was sitting in her chair waiting to do the scene, and she was a good friend to Loretta Young. And she said, so Loretta's watching, the guy drops a hammer and he says, darn, damn, whatever. Loretta says, and pointed to the swear jar, and it was just full of money. And Ethel's sitting over there, and she said, Loretta, what's that? And she said, it's a swear jar, Ethel. Everybody on this set watches their language. So Ethel opened her purse, and she took out a 20. She walked over to the swear jar. She put the 20 in the jar, and she says, hey, Loretta, go F yourself. It's a true story. That's a funny one. So, you know, she was a little sanctimonious. And, of course, she was sanctimonious, and she had this secret. And I was interested in somebody sanctimonious having a secret. Why did she have a secret? And now, of course, when you go on the internet, you'll find out that there's a lot of, there's a lot of rumors and theories as to why she had a secret. And I will tell you this. I went by her autobiography as a basis, her words, and the words of her daughter, because I felt like those would be my foundation. And then from there, the writers that I consider to be the great biographers. And then anything that was, I thought, great journalists or great ideas or any insights. I wrote that, when you go on book tour, people raise their hands and tell you stuff, and I was just in Youngstown, Ohio. And Loretta Young, were you from Youngstown? Yeah. Are you? Yeah. My mom lived here. You're kidding. Do you know Betty Bannon? No. She plays the accordion at every party. Now you know her, right? You know her now. Yeah. She came up to me. She was peeved because nobody asked her to play at the last party. I'm like, Betty, somebody forgot. We'll cover your name. Betty Bannon with her. Anyway, it's true. Anyway, Betty got up at this thing because Loretta Young had come in 1987 to do a luncheon, a fundraiser for a charity in Youngstown, Ohio. And Betty Bannon had 3 children just like Loretta Young, a daughter and 2 sons, roughly the same ages as Loretta's kids, maybe a little bit younger. I mean, I had to be younger. And she was alone in the room. Now, Betty's a personality, a character, we'd call her. Very vivacious. And she was alone with the movie star in the room. And, what do you say to a movie star, And so Betty, in my research, in 1987, this is when Loretta was having trouble with her daughter. They were really not communicating. And so Betty gets up to tell this story. I'm thinking, oh, this is when she was going through a real rough patch with her daughter, Judy. And the reason she was going through a rough patch, let me give you a little backstory. You're going to read this when you read the book. But she never told her daughter that Clark Gable was her father till she was 31. And it's a little worse. She never told her daughter till she was in her 20s that she was her biological mother. And don't get all freaked out. When you read the book, you'll understand why. Anyway, you got to understand when she was born, her life, her job, all of that. Anyway, Betty is alone with Loretta Young, and Loretta says to her, do you have children? And she said, yes. And she explained, she said, she says, I want to talk to you about your daughter. Betty's on the microphone telling the whole crowd this. I thought, oh, if I'd have only known this when I wrote the book, but you can't go back. She said she was very interested, just the 2 of us alone, how I got along with my daughter and how I talked to my daughter. And how do I get through to my daughter? And how when we have a problem, do we work through it? And she said now, in light of what we were talking about in that evening, she said, now I understand it. I never all this time understood why she was so focused on my relationship with my daughter. And she said to Betty, it's very, very difficult and complicated to navigate your relationship with your daughters. Now, all of us don't agree with that who have daughters, but to a mother who it's a struggle for, Betty thought that was very interesting. She says, oh, now I understand why she was asking me how I do it. Interesting. So when I went back and I looked at her autobiography, I said, well, I think this was a real love affair here with Mr. Gable. And so I built my story that way. And then there were other things that happened that were just too interesting to me. Loretta Young was called Gretchen all her life. She was named Gretchen. Loretta was a name given to her. And when Clark Gable was in the hospital and he was dying, he didn't know he was dying, and his wife was pregnant. She came in and she said, I want to talk to you about naming the baby, because she was about 6 or 7 months along. And she said, I like the name John Clark. And he said, oh, I think that's beautiful. And then he had always called Loretta Gretchen, because that was her name. And she said, I'd like to name a little girl Gretchen. So the last thing Gable hears before he dies is that if he has a little girl, her name's going to be Gretchen. Now, when you read the book, this is a tiny thing, but it's one of those things that in your own life, when you start to put all the threads together of the tapestry of your life, it's really fascinating. And it's also what makes a story deep. These little historical facts that all build up. And in this particular story with Loretta, they're plentiful. And her relationship with him, now in retrospect, she has people in her family that say it was different. We're never going to know. So when I come along and I write historical fiction, I'm basing it on what I feel when I read what she has written about the subject and what her daughter wrote. And at this late date, for someone in the family to say that it was a one-time occurrence and that he attacked her, okay, that's possible, because I don't know, I wasn't there. When I read that, after I turned my book in, I thought, well, now let me go back and look at this again. I had 2 documents. In 1950, the last movie that Loretta made, the next to the last movie, was Key to the City with Clark Gable. And she was very close friends with David Niven her whole career. And that's all chronicled in the book. And David Niven wrote very extensively about his friendship with Clark Gable, who he loved very dearly. But he was also very close to Loretta, but he wrote nothing about Loretta. He lived in their pool house. It's the first place he lived in Hollywood. But he never wrote about Loretta. Kept her privacy. It is my theory that he kept the secret. My theory. From reading his autobiographies and then all the books in between about these relationships. So I felt like when I read this theory that Gable had attacked her, and I don't want to use the word because there's a little boy here, I thought, well, it doesn't make sense to me based on this movie Key to the City, because Loretta Young never did anything that didn't come from strength. She never worked with people twice she didn't love. She never ran her set with anything but honor. That swear jar, that wasn't a joke to her. She's like, she meant it. She had a real dignity to her. I thought she would never work with this guy again if he did anything like that. It makes no sense to me. Then I found 2 articles. When this movie came out, Gable wrote about her, and she wrote about him in a magazine that's now defunct, as magazines go. And she wrote a beautiful, funny article about meeting him in this movie, Call of the Wild. And her article's hilarious. His article's poignant about the character of her and what kind of person she was and what she was like to work with and what he liked about her. And there's a sentence in it that kind of knocked me for a loop. That she was really the greatest woman he ever knew. I don't think, now, did someone else write it? Probably. Did he dictate it? Perhaps. But they each had to read these things. There's also a meeting with the daughter when she was 15. It's one of my favorite, that's been recounted by her, by the daughter, and by others, that I took a run at. And, you know, when you look at historical fiction and you look at the sum total of somebody's life, it's really interesting. Because you get to stand back from it as a writer and go, you know the person, you dramatize the person from birth to death. Now, you might say, what's dramatizing? Dramatizing is you make real the imagined, okay? So if I'm going to do a scene from a play, I'm going to bring it to life. So I am bringing to life the idea of the person. So I study Clark Gable, facts of his life from birth to the end, the good, the bad, and the ugly, anything I can find. And then I put it all together. Everything. I don't walk in like pie-eyed, like, oh, I'm in love with him because he's cute. I don't think of it like that, although I thought he was handsome. I think he was handsome. Best actor? Not particularly. Good, solid, movie star, compelling. Spencer Tracy, probably a better actor, if I was going to argue that. But compelling, that's what movie stars are. You want to look at them. It's like my husband came home the other night and he said, I just saw, I don't even want to say this on film who it was, but because I'm not free with this camera going, but it was two brothers, they're movie stars, and he saw them walk in front of our house. And I went, ugh, like that. He said, they got it. They got it. My husband's a lighting designer. He said, and I go, well, but their movies are, he said, they got it. He said, 50 people went by and I went to them. It's a weird, I cannot explain it to you, but it's what Gable has. You would go, oh, him. You would look to him. So when writing about them, you have to look at all of it. Now here's what was interesting to me about Gable, is he thought it was all going away every 30 seconds. Done, career over, career over, career over. There are those movie stars. They think they're done every 30 seconds. That's it, I better do this now. Clark Gable thought by 40 he was finished. He did not think Gone with the Wind was down the pike. When he met Loretta Young, he was married to a woman 17 years older than him. He wanted to have a family. It wasn't going to be possible with this lovely lady from Texas who had children from another marriage. His father was living with him. His mother had died when he was very young. There's a lot of facts that go into this that you sort of assess it, you know. He had relationships with a lot of his leading ladies. Loretta was 21 when she met him. He was 34. And I always say this about her. She's 21. I keep saying this when people ask me. 21. She had been working since she was 4. She had been smoking since she was 9 to bring her voice down, to appear older. But she came from a very loving family, but no father. Stepfather, eventually, nice guy, but he didn't last. So she was used to this. See where I'm going here? So you take these pieces and you, as a writer, I'm not in the family. I don't know. It's historical fiction. But I'll tell you this. Many authors will take people and put words in the mouth of Eleanor Roosevelt. Nobody writes a letter. You put words in the mouth of a movie star, you're going to get a letter. You're going to get letters. People take their movie stars really seriously. They don't want you putting words in the mouth of movie stars. And I was really trying something, you know. I can't wait to see what you think. So I think I'll throw it open for some questions. What do you think? We got very deep here in Nashville. I don't know what happened. You want to take this microphone and run it around, Elise? Or? Oh, Elise, how fabulous. You're really not even going to get up now. You didn't dust. You're not getting up. What kind of an operation is this? Yes, darling. You'll just ask? I'm so teasing you. I know. You know I love you. I know. Okay, I'm being funny. Yes, dear.
Has Judy Lewis made any public comments about your book?
Judy Lewis passed away in 2011. But here's the thing. She has a daughter. I'm kind of defensive of the daughter. I'm very defensive of her. But you know how I write. It's a very loving portrait. It's loving. Of all of them. You know I can't do that other stuff. I can't do it. I don't write like that. No one should be worried. If I write your story, you're going to love it. You need not worry. I'm going to walk behind this because this is like something on a highway here. Tells you to turn off exit 12. Yeah, no, I haven't heard from anybody in the family. Oh, somebody tried to get a hold of me. Somebody who was once in the family, I think. I don't know. It's an incredible family. It's a big family, too. Yeah. Yes.
You never did make the connection about the...
Oh, look, uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I want to know.
Mm-hmm. What's the connection? I'm teasing you. What's the question?
You said the nun brought the picture to your dorm room, and you wanted to know how she knew Kay Gable?
I don't know. I didn't ask her. And the nuns that were there are kind of, you know, well, they're gone. Yes.
The character in the book that was her assistant.
Yes.
Was that a true story?
The character in the book, Alda Ducci, it's based on something true.
Okay. I loved her characters.
Did you read it?
Yeah.
What'd you think?
About the book, I loved it. Loved it.
You loved it. Now see, here we got a live person. So relieved. I shouldn't ask. I shouldn't have asked. Good. Thank you so much. And I love you. You love that Alda and the Luca Chetta, right? Yes. Well, you know, I wanted to write about having made the movie, I wanted to write about how you make a movie. You got a sense of that, didn't you? Yes. Somebody else read it? Carmine? Painting all your houses, honey. Coming over tonight with that roller brush. I'm gonna get my brother to do it because he lives here. He's not that busy. Right, Brandy? My sister-in-law, she's so pretty. And she's a nurse. You know, I'm coming right up for your question, but my sister-in-law, Brandy, she's beautiful and she's a nurse. And you have to understand, since the Etruscans in the Trigiani family and the Bonicelli family, there have been no one has been in the medical profession. We have no upper body strength, and we have no one in the medical profession for about, shall we say, about 17 centuries. Because the Trigiani skeeve anything medical, and we don't like bad news. So you could be at Thanksgiving and somebody's colon falls out and nobody will mention it. Just keep moving past the potatoes. Nobody wants to know. You could cough up a lung. Just please put it in a sack, throw it out. Nobody, please. No bad news. I know these girls are looking at each other like, why is she saying this? I'm just being honest. We don't like any bad news. It's just denial is our family. It's our family crest, except it's in Italian, okay? Anyway, so Brandy joins the family. And this is the conversations on the phone with my sisters. Well, just at any ask Brandy. If somebody has a strange-looking mole, show it to Brandy. A freckle that has moved and morphed, Brandy will take a look at that. Somebody's grown a fourth toe, please show it to Brandy. She'll know what to do with it. I've been coughing a lot lately, and half my head hurts. Brandy will know. All right, dear, back there.
Well, it's interesting, like how she had to hide everything in the steps.
Right.
How do you think she would still hide it today, or how do you think it would be different?
Well, that's a great question. Because now it all seems silly, doesn't it? I mean, get married and have a baby now? I mean, I don't even know what to say. Well,
It was different back then.
well, back then it was very, very different. And also there was the aspect of her religion. She was a very, very, very strict Catholic. And you might say, well, she wasn't a very good one if this happened to her. Well, that's not, I hoped I got into that a little bit in the book. I hope I got into that, because I meant to, which was, and I hope I got to the heart of it, which was, you can't have any redemption if you don't have sin. I'm sorry I looked at you, but I didn't mean it. It's not that you've done anything wrong. My friend right here, these two girls were like, don't look at our friend. She's never done anything. But she sort of didn't when she knows, she figured it out. No, I didn't. It's interesting. That's the heart of it all, isn't it? You're here to learn and make mistakes, and that's the beauty of life. If you don't make mistakes, what's the point? Right? So she learned a great deal. What's sad about this story, to me, is the continuation of the shame. That's the sad part to me, even in saying now that it was an attack of some sort. Why can't it be whatever it was? We don't know, the people are gone, so we don't know. So but it's the shame, the aspect of the shame. Now, there are folks in this audience, me included, here on the stage, that would say we could do with a little more shame in terms of some things these days, right? Do you agree? Does anybody agree with me there? Like, we could have a little shame, maybe just a teaspoon of shame here and there, be nice. Wouldn't hurt. But the problem with the shame, and I get into this in the book, there was a thing called the Hays Code, a contract, which was in 1934. When you were a movie star, you signed it. And what it was, you were under contract to the studios, and the Hays Code, it was if you did anything of an immoral nature while you were in a movie, they could cancel your contract and kick you out of films. And Loretta was 21 years old and knew if she went public with this baby and the situation with this married man, that her career was finished. And she was supporting her family. And she was ambitious, but she was supporting her family. So it was the idea there that she couldn't. With routine regularity, the men could get away with anything. As it is goes in life, right? I mean, look at everybody, even the men are going, yeah, it's true. Because it is true. So she would have suffered a great deal of humiliation and been kicked out okay? And it happened to women whose names you don't know because it happened to them. There could be many books written on that subject. So she was, in a sense, a victim of those times, of that particular time. On the other hand, I think her moral fiber was such that even if it were now, I'm trying to think of somebody that she would be like. It would be somebody who was very principled and you would probably categorize them as religious, a religious person. Yeah, yes.
You know, through the whole book, she never, I mean, when she was pregnant, she never ever considered abortion. So to me, just the thought that she kept the baby, that was such a risk. You know, she could have been found out.
She could have been found out, yeah.
I just thought it was really brave that, you know, she went through.
She did, she was very, yeah. For her, there was no question she was going to keep the baby. But you have to understand, when she had the baby, she sent the baby to live in a halfway house in an orphanage for almost 2 years in San Francisco. And then she adopted the baby from the orphanage. But she went to the orphanage weekly to visit the baby. And that's where my nun character comes in. Because the St. Elizabeth's was owned by the Vincennes. The Vincennes would have taken me as a nun. They took anybody. You could be old, broken down. You could not know your rosary. You could be just the worst, and they'd take you. They'd find something for you to do. Take it, and you know if you know the Vincennes, they're just not. And and by the way, it just closed, St. Elizabeth's. Somebody read the book and wrote to me from San Francisco. It just closed. But it was a combination of hospital, orphanage, halfway house for teen mothers. And Loretta supported it till she died. So she put her child there for almost 2 years, but she went up every weekend. So when I chronicled that in the book, that's all true, according to her autobiography. I'll point that out. Yes. Yes.
I want to hear what you have to say about the whole orchestration of her, the production of hiding the pregnancy, the 2 years, and then coming out. I mean, she did, photographs in a magazine to say, I've adopted this baby. And I mean, that part of this secret and the lie.
Okay. That's a great question, and that's from my honorary niece, Chelsea. Okay.
I'm not planted. I really want to know.
You really want to know. This is not a plant. In the golden age of Hollywood, every star, the first thing they did was they made relationship with journalists. There was Hedda Hopper, there was this woman Dorothy Manners, there was down the line, you got Luella Parsons, you had your favorites. Certain journalists had certain relationships with certain newspapers. And these relationships were key to your survival as an actor and key to your career, to the success of your career. And you made these friendships, and these friendships lasted your whole life. And in Loretta's case, she loved Dorothy Manners. And Dorothy Manners was a kind of a combo platter, because Dorothy wrote about the personalities of the time, but she also wrote what they called shelter articles. And Loretta's mother, one of the reasons they were such great and devout Catholics was that when Loretta's father left them, her mother was bereft. They had nowhere to live and no way of making a living. And she was Catholic, and she went to the local priest there in Los Angeles because John Earl Young was trying to get into pictures. And the priest said, Gladys, what can you do? And she said, I can cook and I can clean. And he said, why don't you put up a boarding house? I'll pay for the house. People are coming from the East. It was a booming business. And she not only put up a boarding house, I'm not implying that this was like a tacky boarding house. She knew how to really put up a place that was beautiful. And then from that, She saved her money, put the kids as extras in the movies, including Loretta, who's 4. It's at the beginning of the book. I'm telling you this so you can get to this part of it. Dorothy would write about the rooms that Gladys decorated and the meals that she put on. Gladys became a doyen and interior designer. She decorated a lot of the movie stars' homes. Now, Loretta and her sisters were friends with John Wayne's first wife, so Gladys Belzer, what's her name, did John Wayne's home. And they did these spreads in magazines. So when Loretta was pregnant with the baby, she disappeared to Europe, which I chronicle, but I imagine that with Alda. I sent her to Italy. She, in fact, went to England in different places, but I sent Gladys to England to like get antiques. Because, you know, I wanted you to go to Italy in my book, so I put her there. So when she comes back, this is based on a true article that I could, you know, I'll share with you. They put Loretta in a bed in her bedroom. They dim the lights. They put pillows on either side of her. They sink her down. Classic Hollywood trick when you're shooting a pregnant woman. Kind of pale her out, put her hair on the pillows. She comes in and says she's been ill. She's going to have some surgery later in the year here. But by January, she'll be back acting. The baby was due in early November. And by the end of December, just as I write in the book, David Niven took her out to dinner with her sister. The baby was born. The baby was in Venice in a house that Gladys bought, you know, just down the road, basically. They had a nurse, kept the secret, but she was pregnant in that bed. And her own daughter, Judy, in writing about it, quotes from the article and says that Dorothy Manners either refused to see what she saw or that they covered her with all these satin blankets. You couldn't tell. You know, her face looked the same, just that she'd been very ill. And people bought it. They just bought it. She had done so many pictures in a row that they bought it. The other thing about Loretta Young's career that's so fascinating to me is that she never signed one of those studio contracts. Like, she wasn't like MGM. She wasn't like Joan Crawford or Myrna Loy, where she just signed on. She was picky. Not that those other girls weren't. They were. They were strong actors and they were great, and I don't mean to imply that, but like Betty Davis was at Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers pictures, as you know, they were complicated pictures. They were Mr. Skeffington. They were ornate scripts and deep, and Betty was tough, and she demanded certain things in her movies, and she did Jezebel. I mean, she's tough, you know. Loretta was a bit younger than they were, and she felt she didn't get good parts. So she was pickier, and she worked for Daryl Zanuck, and she felt Daryl Zanuck didn't give her good scripts. And they were always trying to put her with people she felt weren't very good. Like, give me Donna Amici. They didn't want to give her Donna Amici. He said, we don't like, Donna Amici isn't sexy enough. Well, I like Donna Amici. They'd try to put her with somebody else, you know. And she'd go, no, I want to be with him. He's a good actor. No, we're going to give you somebody else. And she'd go, but I, you know. So she would do things like, the minute she could, she got into radio. Cecil B. DeMille was directing radio in 36, so she got into that. She wasn't a snob about TV when TV came around in 1950. She was on it. She had a mind of her own when she really had no reason to. She was just, so this article, you see, she knew what she was doing. She knew what she was doing. She wasn't being conniving, she was surviving. It's different. She knew what the game was. It was all a world of pretend, and she was going to make it work for her family, for her baby, for her life. And there is much, much, much evidence that Mr. Gable wanted to be part of that child's life, and then wasn't. She pushed him away and pushed him away and pushed him away, and that's evidenced in her own book. So, I mean, I don't, I'm exhausted from the idea that I don't believe, I don't know. There's just too much, to me, when this came, this was late breaking after my book was printed. And I just went, well, really? Yes.
Who stated that?
One of her relatives that knew her really well. Yeah. And it's on the internet, so people are writing me, I don't know what to say about it. I can't speak to it because, first of all, I wrote a book of fiction. So I can't speak to it. I use this as a template, almost like a cautionary tale story, in a sense, But in so doing, I mean, I really came to love the characters. Certainly the daughter, I'm crazy about her. She's very interesting. But to me, she's a seeker of the truth, that daughter. So when I read to the contrary, that she embellished, I don't believe that for a second. All she ever wanted was the truth. I don't think that's fair. I'm all about what's fair in regards to that, Did I see a hand go up or just somebody fainted? Did that answer your question, Shells? Okay. So Dorothy Manners, who is fascinating. Yes?
So when you were reading the book by Judy Lewis, did she mention anything about the ear surgery?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, Judy Lewis inherited Clark Gable's ears. And she was teased because the movie Dumbo came out. That's unfortunate. And so Loretta had the ear surgery done. Up to that, she wore bonnets and hats and had curls pushed over the ears and all. I mean, like anybody who's got anything they're trying to hide, it's just annoying, And are you trying to cut me off, sis?
I was going to go back and dust for a little bit.
Comedian here at the library. Comedy night at Chuckles. What was the question? I forgot. Oh, she really had the surgery, but it was beautiful because it was poignant in her book. And then it was chronicled elsewhere. She had her mother to herself. Her mother's a movie star. Her mother worked, but she had her mother to herself. And she remembered her mother being there every day. It was beautiful. So I kind of looked at the ear pinning back thing. It's kind of sweet. Yeah. One more question, make it a doozy. Pressure's on.
So when you write historical fiction and you do all this background research, I know it's hard to answer, but how do you decide what you put in and what you leave out?
Well, let me give you an example. That's the easiest way I can do this. In 1950, on the set of Key to the City, Loretta had a miscarriage. She's married to Tom Lewis, and she had a miscarriage, and Clark Gable carried her off the set and to the hospital, went to the hospital with her. I read the whole documentation of that. Hers, I read everything about it. Wow, that's a powerful scene. Because he wasn't there when his daughter was born. I thought about it a long time, and I already arced out Alda's story, so I knew what happened to her. And, of course, there was when I was writing it, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to tell the story here. But to me, that's more proof that they had a close relationship. But I didn't put it in the book because I felt almost too much. if you hand me the book, I'll read you. I wasn't supposed to read anything. Can I read something? I had to write, because, you know, he's been portrayed as such a, I don't know, Mr. Gable is such a, I don't know. But I had to really think about him, and what if he ever got the chance to say to her what he needed to say to her? What would he say to her? And I knew that Gable had been invited to dinner and gone to dinner with the Lewises at Loretta's house. And I knew that they had made this movie together. And I knew that they, through disseminating through other things, don't anybody write me letters, we don't know what his tape is playing. Please don't write to me. That there had been conversations about that daughter, about Judy, that darling Judy. Because I could tell from what I had read. And so I had to, you know, I had to come up with a way to have him say to her what she meant to him. And I always like to write something here that I think everybody wants to hear from their man, that they never hear. Because why else would you buy my books? Because let's face it, I'm in the enchantment and entertainment business here. I'm not in the fill in the blanks business. I'm in the elevation business, you know. So let me just find it here really quickly, and yeah, hang on here. Yeah, you'd think I could find it really fast. Yeah, I could find it. Okay, I've almost got it. You know, here we go. Yeah, here we go. Can you believe how fast I can find it? It's very impressive, isn't it? You know why? If you work on this stuff so long, I could probably do it without even reading it, but as I can't do that. You want to read along with me? Are you a Methodist? I always read along with you. It's very annoying. No, of course, it's on page 396, dear. If you want to read along with me. Oh, I see. Oh, you're tight. Oh, honey, I'm not being sensitive, am I? We didn't have that stuff back at Powell Valley. You know, if we had this going on, I don't even know if we'd have gotten out of study hall, to tell you the truth. So we're in a scene where Gable's old now-ish. Not by today's standards, but back then, you know, he's in the last decade of his life, barely. He's not going to live that much longer. He's making this movie with Loretta, which David Niven said, you got to give Gable a job. You know, he's marrying people he shouldn't. He's not in a good way. He's not good. And Loretta was a good person who always looked out for her friends. And I think in her way, you know. So this is 15 years after their daughter is 15, and this is what he says to her. This is Gable talking. I'm going to do something that I've never done before with any woman, and that includes Carol, meaning Carol Lombard. And the reason I grieve so deeply for her and always will is because I never told her how I felt about her. We were too busy laughing to get down to the business of true love. And Loretta says, Carol knows you loved her. He says, we said the words, but we didn't have the years, the history over time that defines love. Do you understand what I mean? He says, we have that, you and me. We met when we were young. Well, you were very young, and that counts for something. Time invested counts for something. I know I made you cry and I brought you pain, and for that, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even at this late date. I'm a louse sometimes, and I can't help myself. I react in the moment. Whatever is in front of me is what I eat, drink, smoke, or hunt. What I pursue. I don't examine my conscience or the past, and I don't even make plans too far into the future. You get me as I am, or you don't get me at all. I want to tell you what you mean to me because I never have, and not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want to hurt you anymore. After we came home from Bellingham and Ria was on the warpath, you were pregnant with Judy and pushed me away, and rightly so. After that, after the baby was born, when I saw you out on the town, you looked like you had moved on, but I was happy for you. When you were happy, I was too. But I never moved on from you. I spent the last 15 years running from my feelings for you, and sometimes I thought I outran them. You made it easy for me to let go, and that was an act of kindness on your part. You loved me, and you didn't make any demands on me. Now I'm almost 50 years old, and I have learned very little on this hayride, but you taught me what love really is. It's letting the person you love be who they are, faults and all, failures and all. It's letting go when you would really rather hold on. So you see, I love you, Gretchen. But I never said those 3 words to you because they weren't enough, and they still aren't. So, your challenge is you're writing a man who's not good at that. And you know where he is in his life. He's getting out of another bad marriage. She's married to a man. She's not happy. She's not going to tell him that. You as a writer wish you could, go in there and say, you 2 crazy kids work this thing out. You can't. You can't get into the story and do that. You have the morals of people, How many people are writing to me and going, oh, but he was a married man on that mountain and this and that. Listen, people. I can't. It's not my circus. It's not my monkey. I'm just telling you what the story is. You know what I mean? They didn't look at marriage kind of the same way we might. They almost get into the pictures and they almost look at their marriages like they were in the movies. Okay, occasionally here and there, you had one of those, Francis D. and Joel McRae, boom, 55 years together. Oh, they hit some rough patches and then they would get back together. Everybody has them, even in real life. We all go through that. So nobody here's a saint. Nobody here's, we're all got our problems. However, this man, in particular, had his ways of dealing with it. And he's being dragged through the mud. I don't like that. I don't like that I live in a culture that anybody can say anything about anybody they want, and now it's on Wikipedia and it's a fact. I think that that's bull. I don't like it. I don't think it's right. And that's about anybody, you included. Somebody go on there and say anything they want about you. Now, is that what we are, really? Now, I write fiction, so they're picking on me. And they're saying, well, you wrote it, it's not true. And I said, well, I'm writing fiction. I'm a storyteller. I make up stuff. That's my job. I'm here to entertain. Well, evidently you can't even do that anymore. There's not my separate category, you see, because the fact people are making up stuff now. We don't get to write a poem because a poem's true. So one more question before I have to go, right, Sarah? What happened to Elise? She said, I'm back there cleaning. Yes. And then back there, we'll do 2. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you are already thinking of your next book.
Yeah, I have my next book. It takes place in the world of music. Yeah, over the last century. Yeah, we'll probably do some Nashville in there. Yes, dear.
What's it like to go back to Big Stone Gap after to look at it from this going to you now.
What's it like to go back in Big Stone Gap and do what? How do you like I said do what? Now I'm back to being Southern again. Do what? What's it like to go back to Big Stone Gap and be there?
And look at your friends and family
And Robert Carroll and those flameless candles and everything? Well, it's hard. I'll tell you what's really hard. It's just all of it. Hard is not the right word. Why do I say hard? It's not hard. It's wonderful. It's also weird. Because, you know, I feel like I'm just like 2 minutes away from the dirt nap, okay, to be honest with you.
Well, you look good.
Well, thank you. Countdown to the dirt. He said, but you look good. It's very kind. We're going to take you over to Cohen's Optical right after this and get you an up close and personal eye exam. I would say, you know, that's a great question because people have asked me that a lot and I have no answer. Let me try to break that down because I think everybody wonders, what must it be like to go home in a heightened way as someone who has written about it, would you say, and taken your hometown and in essence made some art out of it. Is that what you're saying there? Like Thomas Wolfe, you can't go home again? Okay.
You made that a much better question.
I did, didn't I? I dazzled it up for you. I polished it up. Well, first of all, when I was making the movie, before I made the movie there, I would get sick to my stomach when I went home because I just would go to the grocery store for my mother and I'd hear behind me, "You gonna get that movie made?" And I'd turn around and go, "I'm working on it," and then I would just go back. I'd talk to my brother Michael and he'd go, you know everybody. Can't you get that movie made? I mean, my own family would say stuff to me like that and I'd go, "Yeah, I'm working on it." You know, part of getting the movie made was getting it made there. That was really hard because nobody makes movies in America unless they make mob movies in New York, and I'm Italian, I could say that, or they make them on sound stages in LA. These two down here on your phone are being rude. The star of a movie. No, it's terrible. Don't be on your phone, you should be listening. So you should try to make, to me, it would help the economy in America. They kept trying to get me to go to Canada because it's half price. So when you go to the movies, I want you to ask this question. Where was this movie made? Was it made in Nashville, Tennessee? I'm going. Oh, was it a movie about Nashville made in Canada? I don't know. Because we should put our money behind the stuff that's made here. It benefited. Look, it's tiny. Hundreds of years of people have tried this, and I got lucky because Donna Gelati agreed to do it there. And I got Donna Gelati because I got in trouble because my producer had to take another job and he has got kids, and I said, I understand. So I got lucky, and she said, this is cool, and he was gonna do it there. So that was good. So that's what took me so long. Then it was, I got to get everybody on board with the idea that I'm going to use my classmates and real actors. Now my classmates are real actors and with the movie stars, and everybody agreed to that. I mean, they have to trust you. That's the other part of it. So what was the feeling then? Okay, now it's greenlit. Now I'm down there in pre-production, and pre-production is kind of like, that's like when you're pregnant. You're just walking around thinking, oh, I can handle this. You have no idea. Or as we say in Big Stone, no idea what's coming. Ideal. I had no idea. You just think you know what it is to be a parent. You just dreaming it. You just think you know it until it happens. So then the first 48 hours, you know if you're a director. If you get through the first 48 hours and they don't fire you or you don't quit and the actors love you, you're okay. And whatever you've got there in the can is good, you're fine. Now I'm getting to the pith of your question, which is, I'm riding around Big Stone Gap in my mother's car, which, by the way, she was very concerned about me riding around in her car. That car. Finally called my sister and said, why when I come in at 3 o'clock in the morning does Mom go, how's my car? Finally said to my sister, how much is the car worth? She said, $247. The town didn't cease to become my hometown and became a film set to me. So it just became like this, and I started looking at like flats and sun, like, oh, the sun's over there, and then that, and then I started looking at colors. It didn't look like where I grew up, so it was not infused then with any emotion. When I was in Ave Maria's house, which was our friend Pat Bean's house, where we had had many holiday meals and stuff, it ceased to be her home when it was filled with equipment. And when I would go in her bathroom and cry, you know, having a nervous breakdown in there, it ceased to be her bathroom that I remembered. It was a location. So there was that. Then, when we were done and we left, I could feel the energy leave with us, which I didn't, I was sad about that. And then when we returned with the movie, that was, that's not for me, the hoopla part. You would think it would be, having met me here tonight, that I would be very into that. You would think that I like the attention. I don't. I like the work. This part I do. I like it. I actually love you. But if it's not. But it isn't it isn't what I dreamt of doing. I like getting in a scene with the actor, and going, now try it this way. I like when Ricky Wiles comes into the scene and said, there's a special on banana pudding tonight. I mean, I'm in the back biting my fist, just going, oh my God. And then I yell cut and go, who hired Robert De Niro? Ricky Wiles, he was genius. And the actors went crazy applauding this batcher from the Pepsi-Cola plant who'd never been in a play. He never acted. And I said to him, how did you know how to do it? And he said, I just stood off to the side, and I noticed whenever a scene started, the actors went like this. So I went like this, and he just did what they did, and he was magnificent. So it was that stuff that I just loved. There was never a time on that set that I wasn't, because it took so long to make it, I wasn't really grateful. That was good. You know, it'll never happen in my life again like that, ever. You know, the people benefited in joy. Any money that I pulled from Richmond had to be spent on the ground there. That made me happy. It did not go in anybody's pocket. Had to be spent there in goods and services on the ground. So the people benefited directly. The budget was low enough, you know, that it'll make its money back. Here's what I didn't count on. Coming around the corner with the movie, I have to go from city to city, which is what I'm doing now. I hope you'll go. Please go to the movie. How many have seen it? Lots. Okay, so I'm not going to bark at you. Good. You're going to go tomorrow. Did you like it? I forgot I asked you that. You did? Okay, good. You know, I've gone to some cities, like I went to Spring Lake, New Jersey, and I was in front of 500 people. 3 people had seen it. I mean, people just, you know, I said, girls, you got to go, you know. So, and it's not that they didn't want to go. They're just not in the habit of going to the movies. got to get back in the habit. And I said, think about Big Stone Gap. You got to see it in community, because that's why we put it in theaters. I mean, everything about it's a miracle that it's in theaters. We're going to Texas with it. I mean, we're spreading across the South now. This is a big deal. This doesn't happen, you know. And then you have your critics. I've been very fortunate in my life with the critics. Very fortunate. You know, they don't come out, you get the snarks, you know, you get them all the time, you know. But I didn't think about that. When I made the movie, I didn't think about it when I was cutting the movie, and I didn't think about it when we went to the film festivals. I did not think about the critics. I didn't think there would be some who wouldn't critique it. What a shocker. But the minute some of them hear a banjo, you've lost them. The minute they hear a banjo, goodbye, and they're gone. Well, they're not going to, you know. For all the carping these critics do about no women writing and directing movies, you think a woman critic would watch your movie? Pass. That's what you need to know. Now, do I need it? Do people love it? That's all that ever matters to me. I always say this, and I mean it. I don't need anything fancy. I already got the bouquet, which is my reader and my audience. That's it. I don't need it. But I don't want anybody putting a roadblock up from you seeing it or reading it. That's my thing. Especially when they're dumb. What's that mean? Oh, that's what that means? Oh, all right. So that's all. So that's the full answer to that question. So Ed, let me leave on a happy note. You're going to enjoy it if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, I thank you. You got the T-shirt, so obviously you've seen it. And I thank you so much. And I thank you for tonight. Did you enjoy it, Michael? You just, he sprawled out over there. I don't know. Thought he was going to sleep over there. Anyway, I thank you so much. Now I'm going to sign with Elise. I'm going this way. And this will stop at some point. So I'm leaving. Thank you.